Hello VC, I'm back to do another video for you. This one is about Music Matters Jazz, or the label. Now, I previously did a video on Music Matters, and it was a response to John K. Techhead's 100 subscribers contest, if I remember correctly. So it was just as I was coming on to the VC, and I've had many folks join me since then. But this is related to the phone conversation that I had with Robert Z. So I did a video on 5 albums to get people into jazz. In our phone conversation, we drifted to Music Matters Jazz because Robert is always interested in these audiophile labels. So I promised him I would do a video on this because he said he was interested, so I'm going to do another video. For those that have seen my John K. Techhead response to the record investor thread that he started for his subscriber contest, I'm going to show different records this time, so hopefully this will be a little bit redundant, but also something new for you all too to see if you're curious. So to kick things off with Music Matters Jazz as a label, really kind of fascinating history. It was started predominantly by two people, Ron Rombach and Joe Harley. So Ron Rombach had Music Matters Limited, which was a mail order company going back to the 70s. And he also was a librarian, archivist for the largest jazz collection in the United States. So he was archiving and he was curating like 300,000 jazz albums, which is just phenomenal. The guy is very intelligent when it comes to jazz, and he had this mail order service where he was trying to get people Blue Note albums going all the way back to the 70s. Somehow he hooked up with Joe Harley. Joe Harley is also the president of AudioQuest audio cables. And they have phenomenal stuff. I have some of their products in my system, and those two decided to found Music Matters Jazz, and it was going to be a reissue label. And it really kicked off, I want to say, around 2007 when their first pressings came out. Now, Music Matters Jazz are just phenomenal. I think they are the best jazz reissuer label out there today. Unfortunately, they only do Blue Note, which is okay by me because Blue Note has this huge catalog. And Robert was asking me, well, do they do anything else? No, they are strictly Blue Note. I wish that, they would dovetail into other things, but unfortunately this is a labor of love for them. And they are solely focused on Blue Note. Now, I have to talk about some of the other record reissuers, boutique, that are also doing Blue Note, because this kind of factors into some of the things that I'm going to say. So everyone knows Classic Records. Robert Z knows Classic Records. They, I want to say, were one of the first, at least in the United States, to kick off the boutique reissue trend. And I am a big fan of Classic Records editions. If you find one, you can't go wrong. These came from the original master tapes, as does Music Matters Jazz, and all of these were mastered by Bernie Grundman using an all-analog setup. So they sound nice and warm. The pressings are just phenomenal. They are pressed at RTI, just like Music Matters Jazz, and they're on thick cardstock. And they did a wonderful job trying to reproduce the original label, which is important to a lot of collectors. So one of the important things about Blue Notes is just paying attention to the fonts that are used. So you see Microgroove. They're trying to replicate as close as possible to what an original was. Now these, of course, most of them, for the most part, Classic Records, as most people now, started out doing their stuff on 180 gram, but then they transferred to 200 gram. This is something that Music Matters does not do. They do all their stuff on 180. So they got a lot of feedback that there's problems with 200 gram pressings, that they're more prone to warpage. And based on my own experience, I would have to agree a little bit that this 200 gram pressings that I've gotten from Analog Productions, I've actually had a couple that are mildly warped. And so here's another one for you. Now the classic record stuff, if you're in the United States, you can still pick these up fairly cheaply. So what's interesting about classic records was they were bought out by Analog Productions, which is the next company I'm going to talk about. And Analog Productions bought all their back stock for the most part. And you can still find a lot of these guys for like $25 or cheaper. And I mean, again, just thick cardstock. This is Babyface Willette, an organist, Hammond B3 for a Blue Note. Really simple in terms of organist style, but they do a wonderful job, and you can still pick up the remaining stock fairly cheaply. In fact, every once in a while Acoustic Sounds will have a sale, and sometimes it's specific to these where they're knocking another 15% off because they're just trying to get rid of them. So definitely worth checking out. Now, let's talk Acoustic Sounds. So I did the video on 5 albums that would hook a classic rock fan into jazz potentially, and this is one of the ones I show. This is an Analog Productions work. So Analog Productions bought the rights for 50 titles, and so they did 2 series of 25, and for the most part 25 of those are Blue Note workhorses. I mean, they're the ones that folks want to see, and this is like one of them. When people think Blue Note, this is one of the first albums that comes to mind. But then Analog Productions, or sorry, Music Matters Jazz, when they lost the rights, and as of last year, this is one of the albums that Analog Productions picked up. And this particular one I did not show yesterday, but here you go. Take a look at that. This is Music Matters, and this is Analog Productions. So take a look at the artwork there, the photo. See how you're missing some of the detail. They did not grab the original artwork. This is a shoddy reproduction. The other thing that I don't like about Analog Productions, their first issue, is they come in this thin paper stock. It isn't heavy. They didn't try and reproduce the original artwork as best as possible. And then Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman did the mastering for these, so they do sound good. And they did their best job on trying to reproduce the label. Of course, this one's 45 RPM. And here's a shot of the Music Matters label. So it says Microgroove. Another thing that's important is the address here. The address varies throughout the history of Blue Note. So that is something that a lot of collectors take note of. And this is just very, very, very close, if not identical, to the original. Looking at the Music Matters. So looking at the Music Matters version, I mean, you can tell, look at how wonderful the photo is and how striking. Now, all of the Music Matters are gatefolds, and they have photos from the original session that was taken by one of the owners, Francis Wolff. And they do a wonderful job replicating the back cover down to the photos, which again, they're using the original photos, so you get a high quality reproduction. Now this is something that you wouldn't see on the classic records. And just to show you again from the Babyface Willette, you can see that, this is not really the best quality. It's not bad, but doesn't compare to what Music Matters is doing. Now, you look at the back cover of Analog Productions, they're doing a pretty good job. So, very close. Now, how does an original compare? So I don't have very many originals, but I can show you one example. So I don't have a whole lot, again, originals, but here is Art Blakey's Free for All, which is one of the originals that I have. So to show you the cover of the other one, this is Music Matters. Again, wonderful gatefold, which did not exist with the original. And you can take a look at the back. So again, just to compare the two side by side. So you can see they're pretty damn close. And you can see that the back cover is good. So you can even tell, I mean, look at the font up here. And here's the original. So you can see that they're using the original font scheme throughout. And how about the records? So that particular one was 45 RPM, one of the first issues by Music Matters. So of course you got 45 up here, which did not exist in the originals, but you know, pay close attention to the address and everything else here. So again, this is 33 1/3 on the original. And take a look at the address. So pretty close. So Music Matters, when they first came out, the first 113 or so issues were 45 RPM. So why 45 RPM? So with 45 RPM, your stylus is actually tracing through more of the groove over a shorter period of time. So you get better resolution. And that's why if you talk to anyone, a lot of folks will say 45 RPM record, especially the 12-inch singles that were coming out in the 70s and the 80s, those are the best because you get the most detail out of it. Even with a mediocre system, you can hear more detail. And so that's why Music Matters elected to go with the 45 RPM pressing initially. Now, as of last year, they went to 33 1/3. So with 33 1/3, why they went that route, so talking to Ron Rombach on the phone, because I was very curious about why they did this. So, you know, he got feedback that, you know, folks got tired of flipping the record every 5 minutes. Well, they're LP collectors, they're not single collectors, they're not after the details, so you got a few folks that are complaining. You know, the other part of it is production. It costs more to do 2 records, so they went with 33 1/3. Now, what's interesting, the Blue Train issue that I showed you, so this is how they look like brand new. You get this nice label. The other thing is you see 2500 here. So 2500 is how many they press of each of these guys. And so Blue Train was one of the first ones that they did on 33 1/3 because Analog Productions lost the rights. And they had spent so much money re-equipping Kevin Gray's new studio with AudioQuest, like we're talking like cables that cost 10 grand. So they installed a lot of equipment just to extract more detail from the master tapes. And so when this came out, and you can reread the reviews that are online, this blows away the Analog Productions 45 RPM issue. So that gets me to another point. When Kevin Gray is doing the mastering, Ron Rombach is actually in the room, if not Joe Harley too. And I mean, Ron Rombach has heard these multiple times, and so he is giving input to Kevin Gray. Analog Productions, Chad Kasem. Was he in the room with Kevin Gray when he was doing this? Same mastering engineer? No. Chad Kasem was in Kansas while Kevin Gray was off in California with Steve Hoffman at Acoustic. So Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman initially were doing all the mastering for both Analog Productions and Music Matters, and for some reason, I don't know if it was a dispute between the two, but Kevin Gray became the sole mastering engineer for all the most recent Music Matters jazz at his new studio, which is Coherent Audio, with all these new AudioQuest cables. So, you know, he's extracting detail and putting it on a 33 RPM, and if the 33 RPM is blowing away the 45 RPM, it's just just phenomenal. And in Ron Rombach's own words, he said, I heard the Analog Productions, and Analog Productions did a stereo release, and he said, you could drive a train right through it. The separation was so hard left and right, and so when Music Matters did it, they did it on mono, and it's just spectacular. There are a bunch of other reissuers that have been doing the Blue Note for a while. Here, for example, is a wonderful album by Hank Mobley, which is Soul Station. I don't know who the issuer is. This one might have been Blue Note, which came out in maybe the late 90s, but the first ever Music Matters release was actually Soul Station on 45 RPM. And again, take a look at the cover contrast. Finger out of the way. So you got this one, and you got this one. So you get so much better quality out of this. So here's Alfred Lyon, and Hank Mobley here. Alfred Lyon is one of the founders of Blue Note. And the 45 RPM were all limited, but when they went to 33 1/3, they dropped the numbering, which is just fine by me. But even for the 45 RPM, I think it's only the first 1,000 or so that are numbered. And this is just a wonderful album. So the first release, to get an original of this, you're talking like $1,000 for a VG copy, and maybe, some folks have said, five figures for a top-notch copy original of this one. So, Music Matters has dropped well over 100 titles. I think they might be at 150 now. And what I like about them is, so they're mixing the old war horses with some of the ones that you never thought would be released. And so I'm just going to kind of show you a few of these at random. Here's Horace Parlan, which is a very, very nice release. They've done several by Horace Parlan. Here's another one that, nobody thought that they would release. And this is Stanley Turrentine with the Three Sounds. Look at the beautiful cover on that guy. And a nice gatefold. There's some musicians that they haven't released yet. So I talked about Jimmy Smith. I really hope that they'll do Jimmy Smith. Here's Bobby Hutcherson, which plays the Vibes. I love this cover on this one. This is a really good album, Happenings. It's one of Blue Note's war horses here with the iconic cover. Here's one of the very first ever that was released by Music Matters, which is Lou Donaldson and the Three Sounds. And I'm trying to remember, I think this one, no. I'm trying to find an example of a Lexington. Lexington is their first address, and that's the oldest one, at least when they were doing 33 1/3 LPs, and also the 10 inches. So if you look for a Lexington, that's like highly desired by collectors. They also work with Michael Cuscona to do new issues of stuff, and here's an example of a new issue, which is by Grant Green, and they stay faithful to the original artwork. Again, this one was 226, and this one, for the newer stuff, they're just using the New York address up on top. Now, another interesting fact about this, so these are the last time supposedly that the master tapes are going to be touched. And, to get the tapes from EMI, they're having to put down $1 million in insurance money to actually get a hold of the master tapes. Here's Johnny Griffin. This is one that I don't think folks were expecting to see. I happened to get this one, I think, through Elusive Disc. But what I like about this is, take a look at this. They got Hank Mobley, Johnny Griffin, and John Coltrane. And it's a blowing session. So, just a wonderful release. There's another one, John Jenkins and Kenny Burrell, wonderful guitarist. I don't think anyone saw this one coming. I think the last one I'll show today is Andrew Hill, and that's Judgment. Andrew Hill is a pianist. Gets a little bit on the avant-garde, freer side. So they're mixing it up. So you got free jazz, you got funk, you got a little bit of soul jazz, you got hard bop, which I love, of course. So you got a nice mixing of stuff in the releases. Now, they are expensive. So the 45 RPM, when they were coming out, they were $50 a pop. 33 and a third are $35. So I know a lot of people don't even want to spend that much on a single disc, which I totally understand. So that's why Blue Note is doing the 75th anniversary reissues, because they want to get them out cheaply and get them out to the audience. And they're well done, don't get me wrong. I have a few in my collection because it's the only way to get the music, at least on vinyl. But how to get some of these cheaply? So Music Matters, they're hitting all the major music distributors like Music Direct, Acoustic Sounds, which is owned by Analog Productions, Elusive Disc. It's kind of funny because like every 2 months they have a 10% off sale, so you can get 10% off. Also, I hit the Amoeba site from time to time. They'll get them in used. I mean, the folks that buy these take good care of them. So, I've gotten a couple of these as cheap as $25. I mean, used in near mint condition. Do they shoot up in value? Yeah. So if you're a music collector, I mean, they're only doing $2,500 again. And like a lot of the first issues, they're already in three-figure territory for the folks that missed the boat the first time. So, at least the 33 RPM, I think $35 is a little more palatable. I mean, you're talking about coming from the original master tapes, and sometimes folks are saying they sound better than the original issues. Definitely check it out. I mean, if you want to invest, yeah, it's not bad. But, again, I'm after the music, and I want to try and get the best sound possible. If you can't afford it, then, 75th anniversary is good, and there's a lot of really good CD reissues. I mean, people knock the Rudy Van Gelder remasters that came out starting about 10 years ago. To me, they're not that bad. I mean, they don't sound as good as the Music Matters for sure, but yeah, they're decent. I mean, the important thing is the music, and that's why they titled their company Music Matters. And again, they're trying to get the best possible product, and I think by virtue of the work that they've done, you're starting to see Analog Productions, you're starting to see MoFi kind of take their ideas and instill it in their product, which I think just makes it better for the folks that are audiophiles. So, hope this was somewhat informative. Shoot me a comment. You got disagreements or you like what I did, let me know. And again, have a great week, everyone.